We're back on the Medium's book, and we start chapter 3 today. I'm glad we finished physical manifestations that Elmo has more knowledge and was able to give good explanations on everything. A little bit of this is still physical manifestations when we talk about intelligent manifestations. Or manifestations of physical effects, but you know, it's pretty much the basic. So we're going to go through it. Zoraida, you read to us?
Absolutely. Intelligent manifestations. Regarding the incidents that we have just examined, there is nothing in them that necessarily reveals the involvement of some hidden power. Such effects might be explained perfectly well as being the action of some kind of electric or magnetic current or some kind of fluid. This was in fact the first solution proposed for the phenomenon, and it can certainly have passed as being very logical. This solution would have undoubtedly prevailed if there had not been other facts proving its insufficiency. These facts consisted in the evidence of intelligence displayed by the phenomenon. In addition, since every intelligent effect must have an intelligent cause, it became obvious that even accepting the possibility of electricity or some other fluid being involved, another cause was nevertheless present also. What could it be? What was this intelligence? This is what further observations reveal.
Okay. So what Kardec is telling us here is that when you start with all these noises, all these physical manifestations, what we have always to look for is explanations, physical explanations before. So at that time, he was talking about electric or magnetic current. Nowadays, we have many other phenomena that can cause these noises, these actions, these reps. So, you know, you enter a house, an old house that makes a lot of noise. You cannot start by thinking there are spirits there making all those noises. You have to start thinking that the house is old and the noise is old wood or old you know, old noises that that houses produce without being anything related to spiritual phenomena. But as they study, and that's what Kardec, when Kardec started going to see the turning tables, was looking for. He was looking for a rational explanation. And that's what makes sense. We have to look for rational explanation. So, and he said, if he could find a rational explanation, that will be fine. We'll move on. But there was evidence of intelligence displayed in the phenomena. So, what was one of the first phrases that Kardec used when starting Spiritism? If a table does, unless someone proves me that a table has a brain and can think and make decisions, then there must be an intelligence behind the phenomena. An intelligent effect must have an intelligent cause. Again, reason from the beginning. So he said, even accepting the possibility of electricity of some other fluid, there was another cause also. And he asks, what could this be? What was this intelligence? We're thinking here in the beginning. So he's going to see the tables levitating and moving around and people being very excited. And he starts reasoning. What is this intelligence that is behind the table? He's not yet thinking or understanding that or even guessing that there are spirits. He just thinks that there is intelligence. and he's asking, what is intelligence? What is this intelligence? So let's see.
Okay. In order for a particular manifestation to show intelligence, it does not have to be convincing, clever, or wise. All that is required is for it to act freely and voluntarily, revealing an intention or corresponding to a thought. When we see a weather vane moving under the force of the wind, we know that it is only obeying a mechanical impulse. But if we were to recognize signs of intent in its movements, if it turned right or left and quickly or slowly in obedience to our orders, we would have to admit that it was not the weather vane itself that possessed intelligence, but rather that it was obeying our own intelligence. That is exactly what happened with the tables.
Okay, so very important here. First phrase, in order for a particular manifestation to show intelligence, it does not have to be convincing, clever, or wise. You know, the manifestation of a spirit, it doesn't need to be a bright spirit or intelligent spirit. It can be a primitive spirit, just, you know, doing whatever it's doing, but there is an intelligence behind. So if it acts freely and voluntarily, revealing an intention or corresponding to a thought. And then he gives a very good example when he talks about the weather vane moving under the force of the wind. We know that it's only obeying the wind. So if it starts moving by its own, in its own way, not following the wind, turning left or right or going against the wind, so we would have to think that there is not the weather vane itself, but there is some intelligence behind it commanding the movements. And that's exactly what happened to the tables. He saw the tables that were moving despite no reason for them to move, no visual reason or intelligent reason in the movement of the tables for them to move by themselves. So he started to think there is something else here. There is something commanding the movement of these tables. What is this something? Okay.
Okay. We have seen a table move, rise into the air, and produce raps under the influence of one or several mediums. And the first intelligent effect observed was that it obeyed the orders given to it. Without moving about, the table alternately stood on the legs that were indicated to it. Next, when it was square on the floor, it produced a certain number of raps in response to particular questions. At other times, and without anyone touching it, the table moved around the room by itself, going right or left, backward and forward, and executing the various maneuvers that the participants required of it. It was obvious that we could rule out all suspicion of fraud. We accepted the unquestionable paternity of the participants because of their honorability and complete disinterestedness. We will later address the issue of fraud, against which it is prudent to guard oneself.
Okay, so he raises the question of fraud here, which is also important, right? But first, so what did he see in these first meetings that he went? That if you remember and if you saw the movie, he resisted for a long time. He thought that it was useless distractions, that he didn't need to go to this fad that was taking over Europe at that time. That was the table turnings. But after refusing sometimes the invitations, a very serious friend of his that he truly believed and known to be a very serious person invited him, telling him, you have to go because there is something else there. So out of respect and curiosity, he decided to go. And when he goes, what he sees? He sees a table that moves, rises into the air, produces raps, and obeys orders. Stood on the legs, produce a number of raps, answering questions. Other times, and without anyone touching, the table moved around by itself. So he was seeing all this phenomena happening, and became curious to what was behind this phenomena. And of course, the first thought here is, can we eliminate all suspicions of fraud? And because of the people that were present there, the seriousness, as he says there, the disinterestedness and honorability of the people present there, he discarded the possibility of being a fraud. So that's the first thing that we have to do. When we see these phenomena occurring, we have to look to see if there is anything behind it. So the first thing that we have to suspect is the possibility of a fraud. When we analyze medium mystic communications, and we'll study this later in the book, also the first thing that we have to analyze is the seriousness of the communication. First, if the communication is coming from a spirit, or is not coming from a medium, which is not really a big problem. There was a lot of problems with animism in the past, in the 50s and 60s in Brazil, and but this later has been discarded, because we know that the medium has a participation. If it's more or less, it's not really that relevant. What's important is the message. But coming back to the table here and to the question of fraud, that's what Kardec concluded. So here he discarded completely the possibility of fraud. So if there is no fraud, then there is something else going on with the table, because the table is moving back and forth, up and down, answering questions, and he knows for sure that the table has no intelligence. So he continues his studies.
Okay. By means of raps, mainly those produced within the wood itself, which we have already addressed, even more intelligent effects were observed, such as the imitation of the beating of drums, the discharge of muskets by a file or platoon, the firing of cannons, the rasping of a saw, the strike of a hammer, the rhythms of a certain arias, etc. An entire vast field was therefore opening up to investigation. It was further reasoned that if there was in fact an invisible intelligence present, it might be able to respond to questions, and in fact, it really did respond with a yes or a no, according to the number of agreed upon raps produced. Since these two responses were quite limiting, however, a system was established using a certain number of raps to correspond to each letter of the alphabet in order to form words and sentences.
Okay, so besides the tables, other intelligence phenomena were observed. So the beating of drums, the discharge of muskets, the firing of cannons, and other things. So they were in the presence of a lot of phenomena of physical effects. And again, we discussed last week when Elmo was presenting the phenomena of physical effects, why it was necessary. It was necessary to call our attention, because from there we could get to the mediums producing something, and that's where we are going to get very soon. But if the spirits had not called our attention through this phenomenon, this physical effect phenomenon, we wouldn't believe or pay much attention to the intelligent phenomena, intelligent mediumship that was going to happen later. So we have to start, the spirits knew that they had to start from the beginning, which is calling our senses. You know, we hear, seeing, and experiencing these phenomena that were happening, physical phenomena that were happening, to make someone, and of course Kardec was the chosen one from the beginning, to study it and to analyze and to make something out of it. So of course Kardec goes there at a certain point and starts, well, if there is an intelligence behind, this intelligence might be able to answer questions. And so let's start with simple questions. Questions that, you know, if it's a yes, you tap once. If it's a no, you tap twice. And they start asking these questions, and they were, some were surprised, some not, to receive answers from the table. So the table would produce the reps, meaning yes or no to the question. But again, if you want to go deeper into a subject only with yes and no answers, is very hard. You don't go very far. You know, yes and no just give you basic. So you have to go beyond the yes and no. So since these questions, these responses were limiting, they established a system that a number of reps correspond to each letter of the alphabet in order to form words and sentences. And you can imagine how long would it take for one single sentence. Because you may imagine if the sentence has a lot of U's and V's and Z's, you know, it's an endless number of reps, and you have to have someone that can count them very efficiently, because if you lose count in the middle, you lose the word completely. So it's very cumbersome, this method. But again, you have to start somewhere. For them to evolve, they have to go step by step. So from yes and no, let's attribute a number of reps. So A is 1, B is 2, C 3, and so forth until 26, which is Z, right? You can imagine, you know, it's 26 reps to get to the letter Z. But again, that's how they started. But of course, they very quickly reached the conclusion that that was going to be a nightmare. You know, who were going to stay in those meetings to spend 2 hours to produce 2 phrases? So they start analyzing different things.
You know, the other day, John, I was watching, since we have Halloween coming around the corner, there are a lot of movies now that they show all this. And there was one in the 1920s, I think, 30s. And it was a group who had a planchette, the ones that they try to give communication, and it became chaos and crazy. But still, they had the idea. It was starting out, not as Kardec is explaining to us now, but somehow that you see how slowly it has become to where we have this, thank God, we have the medium's book that's explaining all this, that sometimes can be very complicating, and people might just lose themselves if we do not know what we're looking at. So it's so nice that it is explaining everything from the beginning, and not get confused of what it started out to be and what it is today.
Yeah, you know, we look at this, when we look back, it amuses us in a sense, right? The beginning, you know, the trouble they went into the beginning, but this was absolutely necessary for us to get where we are today. You have to start from the beginning. You have to go step by step. You cannot jump steps there, because if you start from, if you jump from this to a medium, it was not going to convince. It's already difficult to convince when you go through all the right steps. many people still today discuss the very possibility of mediums existing with all different excuses and all different explanations. Now, if we haven't gone through this very step-by-step process that he went through, creating the basis from what Spiritism grew on, it wouldn't be possible. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, 69, right?
Yeah.
Since occurrences were being repeated at will by thousands of persons in every country, they can leave no doubt as to their intelligent nature. It was then that a new theory was devised for interpreting them, attributing the manifesting intelligence to the medium, the observer, or even the participants. However, the difficulty was in explaining how this intelligence could be reflected within the table itself and be communicated by means of raps. Since the raps were not produced by the medium, then they must be produced somehow by thought. But for the thought to somehow be able to produce such raps would be a more remarkable phenomenon than all the incidents that have been observed. It did not take long for experience to show that this theory was unacceptable. In fact, the responses were very often shown to be completely opposite to what the participants were thinking and beyond the scope of mediums' intellect. They were even they were even given in languages unknown by the medium, or they pertain to facts unknown by any of the participants. Where am I?
Sorry.
Okay. By the participants were opposite of what the participants were thinking and beyond the scope of medium's intellect. They were even given in languages unknown by medium, or they pertain to facts unknown by any of the participants. Such examples are so numerous that it is almost impossible for anyone to be involved with spirit communications without having witnessed them many times. We shall cite only one example, which was related to us by an eyewitness.
Read the next one because it's the example.
On an Imperial French Navy ship stationed on the seas around China, the entire crew, from the seamen to the captain, entertained themselves with the talking tables. They decided to evoke the spirit of a lieutenant of the same vessel who had died 2 years previously. He responded, and after several communications that surprised everybody, he used raps to say the following: I beg of you to pay the captain the sum of, he indicated the amount, which I owe him, and which I regret not having been able to pay back before I died. Nobody had even known about it. The captain himself had forgotten all about the debt, which was quite small, by the way. However, upon checking his financial records, he found the entry of the lieutenant's debt in the exact amount indicated. Now we must ask, whose thought could have possibly be reflected in this instance?
Okay. Interesting story, right? Um, so, so what was happening then is that these occurrences were happening with thousands of people in every country. Remember, the turning tables was very popular and it was all around Europe. The communication with the spirits, as they decided to use it, was very popular. So everywhere they were having intelligent communications from the spirits or from whatever they called at the time. And finally, they developed a theory that there was an intermediary between the spiritual world and the physical world, and that the intermediary was Kardec called it the medium. But it was difficult to understand how this intelligence could go from the medium to the table itself, because the raps were not produced by the medium. So it must have been produced by something else. And of course, they had no idea of ectoplasm and how the mediumistic phenomena of physical effects worked. So they start analyzing, and they thought it could be produced by the thought of the medium, but they reached the conclusion that it could not be so, because the communications were beyond the scope of the medium's intellect. They were giving in languages unknown by the medium, or they were discussing facts that were unknown to all participants. So this was further convincing those that were studying, especially Kardec, that there was an intelligence that was different from all the presents, that was someone else. And it's around that time that he asks, and the spirits says at the end, the classic answer, it's us, spirits, those that have lived before you on earth, that have gone back to the spiritual world. So Kardec finally learns that it's really communication from those that have moved back to the spiritual world. But they are still studying how does it work, and questioning, like it is being questioned until today, the veracity of it, of the communications, and if there is no medium's awareness of it. And when you see today people discussing psychics, right? That you go to psychic and the psychic tells your future, your past, and many things about your life, and they are always asking, well, she or he, was able to just Google me, and he was able to ask my friends, and sometimes that's really what happens. But sometimes they're really mediums, and they can gather this information from the spiritual world. So, and then he gives a very simple example, simple story here, that of something that nobody in the ship knew, not even the captain remembered it, didn't really care about it. But the spirit tells that, he owed the captain a small amount of money, and the captain goes there and looks for it and finds. How come this message will come if not by the person who actually owned the captain the money, right? So that was another proof that this was coming from spirits that have lived on earth before us. Dani.
Saturday was Allan Kardec's birthday, right?
Yes.
So Mariana talked about Allan Kardec, and Olivia was in the class Saturday. And then she finished the class and she came to me and said, do you know that's Allan Kardec's birthday today? And I said, yeah, I know. Do you know that he received the same spirits all the time, and they made the tables fly? and then she finished, let's go and make some tables fly. So she learned exactly what we are talking about here, but in her own language. It was really, really cute.
Cute. I like that.
But she wanted to make tables fly afterwards, so it was a little okay.
Yeah, that's the problem, right?
But there is another thing that I'm seeing here. The beginning of this book, it feels more like a journal. Like feels like he is writing everything. I don't know if he's thinking about the book already, but even the details he gives, the places, the people, even this little story here about the captain, it feels more like he was making a journal, so he wouldn't miss one little thing about his discoveries or the things he was learning that was very new to him.
Yeah,
right?
you know, being an educator and being a writer of many books for that some of them are still used in France today, he had his mind in an organized way of constructing things, right? So he most likely he thought that to do a book on mediumship, he had to go from the very beginning and go step by step explaining how everything started, and until he reaches the point where he can discuss more about mediumship itself. And I know that the beginning can be a little bit lengthy because not a lot of this we know, but I think it's important that we go through again from time to time to remind ourselves on the difficulty, on the challenges, on the work that he has done, that he had brought to us, and the importance of all the construction of the castle from the very basic, from the basis. So yeah, I agree with you. I think he's reporting here his experiences, and you know, if you read the posthumous works, you'll see that there is a lot of the descriptions there of the beginnings that they found later in his writings, that there is a lot more of things that he wrote and he left he didn't publish in anything, but it tells more of the story of how he got to study and to know all these phenomena, and to construct something, a doctrine on top of it.
Johnny,
yeah,
you opened the door there when you mentioned, what the word did you use? A truth seer?
the psychics.
Yeah, a psychic. Okay, let's use psychic. Is it correct to believe that most of those true psychics who tell things about you, etc., are actually obsessed? They are being obsessed by one or more spirits who are just, saying things to them or showing things to them, but it's essentially a sort of heavily obsessed person?
No, I wouldn't call them obsessed, no. So you have to divide the psychics. And I mentioned psychics because here in New York, you find a psychic in every corner. So, you know, we in front of our center, the other side of the street, we have a psychic there. So, you know, we always joke that, you know, if you are not happy with the Spiritist Center, you can always cross the street and go to a psychic if you want to know your future. Because we have sometimes people that come to our center and ask for readings, what they call readings, right? Which is, again, you have mediums, you have psychics. There is a difference also between mediums and psychics, right? Psychics use their own abilities. It's their own. When you go to the spirit world and you are seeing and reporting what you are seeing, you are not a medium. You are a psychic. The difference between the two can be very subtle, but the medium is when you are bringing the message from another spirit from the spiritual world. When you are bringing your own message, you are psychic.
Okay, but maybe I used the wrong word in English. I am referring to a number of people. Yeah. I actually was present years and years ago, at least on 3 very, very similar, whatever, I would say mediums, okay? And they would clearly state, they are telling me this, they are telling me that, they are showing me this.
So, yeah, these are mediums, yes. But the thing is, here they use both. They use mediums and they use psychics, and they don't know the difference. But the difference is that a medium is what you are talking is a medium. They are not
obsediados, obsessed?
No, not really, not necessarily. They really, some of them really have the ability of communicating with the spiritual world. They are mediums. The big question is, how serious is the spirit giving them the communications, and what are they talking about. So normally what we say here is why Spiritism tells us that mediumship, if you give for free what you receive for free, because the moment you go there and you pay, the person is forced to give you something. So if the spirit doesn't come, they will have to create something and give you an answer or give you back the money. They never want to give you back the money, so they will give something to you. Can some of them be obsessed? Yes, but I don't think that influences their ability to give the communications. They are going to tell what they've been told, and they are going to tell the person who is paying what the spirit is telling them. And the spirit may be, as we've been studying and we know very well, the spirit may know what they're talking about. They may not know and be making fun of the person who is sitting there, or be a pseudo wise guy that is pretending to know something that they don't really know. So there are many different alternatives and possibilities. But normally what we say is that, you don't know what you're going to get. You have no guarantees. So it's really, most of the time, is a waste of money, right? Now, can't it be real? Yes. If someone deserves to receive a help and assistance, it's a person with good intentions that is in desperately need of help and deserves to be helped, then and he goes to a place like that, the spirits, the protecting spirits of that person may use the medium to give to that person what that person needs to receive. So, again, how do we know that? We don't. It's not. Yes, medium should never charge. Yes, that's what Spiritism tells us. But we live in a country that mediums charge all the time. That there is a whole city called Lilydale that is with full of houses with mediums that are charging for you to go there and have your readings, and they all believe that all spirits communicating are evolved spirits, which is the big difference between us and them. They believe that all spirits communicating, and that there are these spiritualists from Lilydale think that all spirits are superior spirits communicating, and that's, we know that they are not. But actually, Luis, we went together to that lady that read on leaves or something like that long time ago. And that was the only time that I went to one of these places. That was in Campos do Jordão.
I remember now. I wasn't thinking about that particular time, but yeah, that particular. I sorry to bring this subject, but is that I was thinking about the medium, not everything else. And again, the mediumistic phenomena, they are here. They have been here since, before written language. It's a phenomenon. It's part of our being humans, or since we became humans anyway. But for the medium, it should be very, I was wondering, the kind of obsession, if it's an obsession, could be horrible. Always the same spirit.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have some mediums here in the meeting that
yes,
they know
it is. If I can add my 2 cents.
I was thinking of you.
I just want to add to about this whole story about psychics and mediums who can see what's going to happen. As I guess you all know, that there are many ways of doing tarot, palm reading, búzios, leaves, coffee. There's so many ways of coffee stains. I mean, so many ways of doing it, but that depends so much on the level of expertise of the person, the medium or the psychic doing this, and the way of them to their ability to express themselves, what they're seeing, and then of course it also falls into the person listening to their ability to understand and construe their own dream on top of what they heard. Because that's what I always find. I know so many cases of people that go to these places and they come to me and they tell me what's happening, how it was. And I've been to some of them accompanying these people. And so, yes, there could be obsessors occasionally working with mediums, but is again a type of, call it partnership for lack of a better word, that is, you know, their story, and it's hard to really get into detail now. But in essence, there are, from my experience and from my little knowledge that I have, and I've studied this a lot, but I have seen that there's a very similarities about Shintoism, which is a very old Japanese religious belief that precedes Buddhism, that they always they still have it in Japan, temples where they go and present and give offers to get me a nice husband, or let me pass my exam in this year, or things like that. And there's some similarities to that culture and belief to other cultures in Africa and medieval Europe, and also, of course, Umbanda, which is the same idea that you communicate with the spirits who are going to help you if you do something for them. This is a level of, the way that I see it, probably the best of obsessions, because it is utilizing a level of intellect of the human being in order for him to progress. Because I think ultimately what is at place here is the well-being and the progress of the person receiving the message.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fabio. Yep.
Sure.
Okay. Go on. Yeah.
Okay. This art of communicating by the alphabetical system of raps was eventually perfect, but it was always okay.
Sorry,
Okay.
I got lost here. One sec.
There we go.
Go ahead.
71. Gonna bring it up?
I cannot bring it up.
Okay. Okay, I'll go. This art of communicating by the alphabetical system of raps was eventually perfect, but it was always very cumbersome. Nevertheless, some lengthy communications, as well as a few interesting revelations about the world of spirits, were obtained. This method gave rise to others, and hence the arrival of written communications. The first communications of this type were obtained using a miniature table to which a pencil was fitted and then placed upon a sheet of paper. Upon the medium's influence, this tiny table began to trace out a few letters and then began to write words and sentences. The process was gradually simplified by using even smaller tables that were specially made to fit the hand, followed by tiny baskets, cardboard boxes, and finally simple plachettes. The writing was fluent, rapid, and easy, as if done by hand, but it was realized later that all these objects only served as extensions of the hand itself, simple pencil holders which could be dispensed with. In fact, the medium's own hand alone, impelled involuntarily, could write under the influence of a spirit without the concurrence of either the medium's thought or will. From then on, communications from beyond the grave presented no more difficulty than everyday correspondence among the living. We shall return to these different means later in order to explain them in more detail, but we have given a quick outline here in order to show the string of the events that led to the realization that the phenomenon entailed the involvement of invisible intelligences, that is, spirits.
So we get to the discovery that there are spirits behind the communications. Here, what Kardec is telling us is how did we get to psychography? Remember, all the basic books of the codification the messages were all received through psychography, because they have no recording devices at that time. If someone was talking, someone would have to write, and it's not easy to write well when someone is receiving a message. So psychography is the most efficient method of preserving what was being brought by the spirits, and to organize, to study, to analyze. So how did we get to psychography? That's what Kardec is telling us here. So in the beginning, the alphabetical system of raps was being perfected, meaning I imagine, and this is me talking, but thinking about logically, probably the letters that it was used more in the alphabet were a smaller number of reps, and the letter almost never used are the ones with large number of reps. Instead of being A1, B2, C3, you use E, probably if I don't know in French, but if it was in English, E is probably the most used letter. So E would be 1, A would be 2. You start with the vowels, and then S and P, and those are smaller number of reps. So I imagine that's how they perfected it, but I don't know. That's me talking about it, not any information I have. So eventually, this method gave rise to others. So they started using, so from a big table that was making reps, let's move to a small table that could be fit on top of a table, and you attach a pencil to it, and then we put that small table over a piece of paper. And under the influence of the medium, this tiny table starts to write words. But if we can use a small table, maybe we can use smaller tables that can fit in a hand. And then from there, you move to tiny baskets. You move to cardboard boxes. And then finally, the simple planchettes, which were the last instrument they used. From there, they moved to your hand simply holding the pencil and allowing the spirit to write through your hand. So that's how we got from the reps to the psychography. And from the psychography, really, it's when Kardec starts to organize Spiritism and starts to ask questions to the spirits in several different places, and collect all the answers, analyze them, separate them, and produce the Spirit's book, which was all of it was done in a couple of years. He first went to those meetings in 1855, and he released the Spirit's book in April 1857. So in a couple of years, he went from the reps to the planchettes, going through the small tables, through the psychography, through sending mediums questions to be answered by the spirits, to analyzing the questions, the answers. It's really an incredible work that Mr. Allan Kardec has done in 2 years to produce the Spirit's book. First edition came with 570 questions. Only the third edition was the final edition that came with 1,019 questions that, if I remember correctly, it's 2 or 3 years later that it was published, the third edition, but I'm not completely sure. So from there, we came to Spiritism, and that, with it, we end the chapter. We're not going to start next chapter because we are going to a different, going back to the physical manifestations. We're going to talk about noises and things like that, but we'll leave that for next week, okay? And so any questions, comments here? Yes, Carol?
Just a general question. I know the Parker Brother game board or board of a Ouija board, was that something that would have been a part of this evolution, do you think? The
I
Ouija board
don't.
with the planchette?
Yeah, the Ouija board. I don't know the answer, Carol,
Oh,
to be very honest.
okay. I'm
Yeah,
just curious.
yes. If you can find more information
I
and bring
will.
to us, we would appreciate. But
Okay.
I really don't know the origins of the Ouija board.
Yeah, I
And
don't know.
I think, have you heard, Luis, of the Ouija board and how the origins of it, or no?
I know of the Ouija board, but I don't know the origin. I would guess yes, but it would be pure guess.
Yeah, same here. Danny.
Would you take away the text so we can see each other? Sorry.
Sure.
I don't know what a planchette was, and I just googled it, the image now.
Yeah.
So it's quite an interesting artifact.
Yeah.
It has another name other than planchette, or that's how it's known.
That's how
That's how it's known.
That's it.
Yeah, it has 3 feet. It's like this, right? Yeah,
Uh-huh.
there you grab something here and it writes something like that, right?
Yeah, because in my job I work with artifacts, and we analyze it and everything. I never saw this. There is no. I don't think this is in a museum. It might be in a museum, maybe in France.
I only see that in movies.
Yeah, I didn't. I haven't seen it, so interesting. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Danny. Anyone else? Okay, Carol, you do a final prayer.
Sure. Infinite Creator, great intelligence, we give thanks to our Creator for this time to be together, to share the study of the Medium's book, our Chapter 3, Intelligent Manifestations. We are grateful to be together for this class, for this discussion, to have a little bit more insight into the intelligent manifestations within Spiritism. We are grateful for our spiritual benefactors who are here with us, giving us encouragement, guidance, and helping us to be more inclined to be in an evolved path this life. We are grateful for the knowledge that we have received, helping us to put in practice these teachings each day. We give thanks for the time together, helping each other to grow, to develop, and to become more enlightened. May we use this time during the week to share our thoughts, our prayers, our concerns within, to do an outpicturing of goodness in the world. May we bring forth our prayers in the world. May we be helpful. May we be more charitable. And may we find an inner peace as we do this work. As we close the meeting tonight, we are grateful for the teachings that we have received, for sharing the knowledge, and to return to the teachings again next week. We give thanks for the lessons learned and for the love and light of Christ within. May we close now and humbly ask for peace, for safety, protection for our loved ones, our family, friends, and those who we encounter each day. We give thanks for the blessings of Spiritism, and may its good work continue. Go forth now in peace. So be it.